down on the program to take about an hour this morning. We heard last night that we're not sticking to the program. We'll probably take a little bit more out than an hour in this, but that's because there's a reason for that. The reason is because I want you guys to interact with me. Now, I just saw some faces over here. If you need to get up and leave because you're getting bored, no worries, just do it. If you want to go out and play, kids want to go out and play, if your mum and dad say it's okay. Younger folks, if you want to go out and jump on something, that's okay. Older folks, Graham, if you want to go out and swing on the swings, that's all right, yeah. But what I want to do is have a time when we're engaged with each other, all right? So as we unfold this morning, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to put your hand up and ask. But if something that I say triggers something for you and say, oh, I know that happened in my life here, don't be embarrassed to share that, because that'll help us get to understand what I'm talking about. Last night we talked about love, and we talked about why it's so important. And I just wanted to say this one thing very, very quickly. We looked at a scripture last night, and there's a passage in the scripture that we looked at that talked about the atoning sacrifice of Christ. And I know that some of us who have been around for quite a while probably went, isn't that about punishment? It's not. And if you'd like me to explain why, I will, but I won't do it now. So at some stage later on, if you'd like to explain why atoning sacrifice is different from punishment, I will more than happily do that, okay? So if you had that question, if you don't, if you're able to just accept that atoning sacrifice is talking about a gift, then we're all good to go. But if you want that explained, I'll more than happily do that. All right, so we're moving this morning into understanding the barriers to love. In order to understand the barrier to love in our lives, it's really important that we get a concept of how our story, our life story works. Life is lived as a narrative, and we think about it as such. When you think back across your past, you don't think in sentences or a concept. You think in stories, right? Think about the last time you went to a shop. You went to the shops. Your memory starts to unfold in a story, doesn't it? You went out, you got out of the car, and you drove, because that's how we live our lives. I didn't get out of bed this morning and wander across here in disconnected steps. It was a whole series of things. It's about my story. Well, the thing is, so very often we see faith in terms of moments. I got saved on such and such a date. I got sanctified on such and such a date. I had a great service back there. I had a great time of prayer back there. And we think about faith in these moments. The problem with thinking about faith only in moments, and there can be some wonderful moments in our life. The problem, however, in thinking about faith only in moments is our struggles, our fears, our pains walk with us through our lives, right? And we're very aware of them all the way along. And there are times we have to stop and we have to take a moment of faith to deal with the problem. But what if we could start to see faith in terms of the story, not just the moment? So that's what we're going to try and talk about a little bit this morning. So in a few moments, what we're going to do is we're going to start working our way through some stories, right? So what I want you guys to do in a few moments is I'd like you to break up into groups of 3 or 4. If you're more comfortable in a group of 5 or 6, that's okay. But I'd like you to get into groups of 3 or 4, and you're going to tell each other some stories. I want everyone to tell each other 2 stories. One story, a time when joy jumped into my life. When all of a sudden something wonderful happened and I was just over the moon with joy. Tell that story. Secondly, I want you to tell the story of when pain or embarrassment came into your life. All right? So a little bit harder story to tell. So we're going to share those, and when they're done, we'll give some time for us to share those stories in a group. The stories that we got really excited about, I want us to share in the group. But here's the catch. We're not going to share, when we come back to the group, we're not going to share our story. We're going to share somebody else's story, right? So we won't have a lot of time. We're going to give about 15, 20 minutes to this whole process. So we'll have to watch that. But when we come back, we're going to be telling somebody else's story. Of course, when somebody's telling your story, if you're the person whose story is being told and the other person gets it wrong, you can correct them. That's okay. But that'll be... So to help us get there, let me tell you a couple of stories. Look at that.
Very bad.
Isn't that good looking guy standing there?
Yeehaw!
That was my best day's fishing ever. It happened in a moment when life was feeling pretty down. I was living in America and my family had moved back to Australia, and I'll tell the rest of that story a little bit later. But I was on my own. A friend of mine said to me, "Hey, would you like to go fishing?" I love fishing. But I'm one of those fishermen that when you go fishing, you know, you spend all day, and if you get 3 or 4 nibbles, you go, "Oh, that was a great day." You know, that's how I go fishing. Every now and then you might catch a fish. This day, this friend of mine had a guy who owned a boat, and we went out into the Gulf, what's that called?
Gulf of Mexico?
Gulf of Mexico, that's the one.
Very
And went off Houston, and we went way out. We went about 30, 40 kilometres out into the Gulf. I mean, a long way out. It took us a long time to get out there. And when we're out there, we started fishing. Didn't get a single bite. And the guy said, "You know what, because they have oil rigs in the Gulf." He said, "Sometimes if you get up close to an oil rig, you can catch fish off the oil rig." So he took us up to this oil rig, and we parked just off the oil rig, and we put our lines in, and we just caught fish after fish after fish. It was the most amazing thing. And that was my catch. So those were all snapper there, and that's a mackerel, the big one that I'm holding in my hands there. That took about 15 minutes to get into the boat.
Wow.
So it was just fun. I mean, it was just a great day. It's one of those fishing stories where I got photos to show it's not. I'm not joking here. That was my catch. The other guy, we had barbecue fish at church the next day. Fed 90 people from the fish that we caught that day. So that was a great story. That's a day when happiness came in, joy came in. That was a good story. So then, can you see this photo is a bit too light here? So those are my 2 kids hugging me. Can you see that?
Yeah.
That should be a photo of joy, and it is. But that's the day, hang on. It's our last day in church when my family came home, and I stayed in America to keep pastoring that church. We didn't know how long it was. It ended up taking 2 years. We thought it was going to be about 3 to 6 months. So I was apart from my family for about 2 years. The church I was pastoring, we planted there, was incredibly wonderful. They flew me back to Australia every 6 to 8 weeks, and they let me stay for 2 to 3 weeks. So I would spend 6 to 8 weeks there and then 3 weeks in Australia. So that was just an incredible way of balancing it out. But it still meant every time I left them for about 6 weeks at a time. And so this is the last. They go from church to the airport to fly home. So that's a day that I look back on and I go, that hurt. That hurt that day. My little girl said to me, my daughter, the youngest one there, Tyler, she said to me on the way to the airport, "Daddy, this feels like you and Mummy are getting a divorce." And I said, "We're not getting a divorce." And she said, "I know, but that's what it feels like." We taught our kids to understand, to think through how things feel and to talk about how they feel. And I fell into that mistake because of my pain trying to correct her. But what she was telling me was what it feels like. So there are moments in our life where sadness or embarrassment overcome us. So I want us to be able to share some of those stories with each other as well. It doesn't have to be as painful as that. You can talk about the time you went to the grocery store and you got the milk out of the fridge and it dropped on the ground and it spilled and all the milk went everywhere and someone had to come in. That's an embarrassing story. That'll do. But that's what we're getting at here. Is those kinds of stories. All right, I think that, so what we're going to do is we're going to break now. You can go outside, find a group of 2 or 3 people that you're comfortable with. Stay in here, go outside, wander around, go for a walk, do whatever you like. But in that time, tell each other those 2 stories. A story where joy came into your life, and then a story where pain or embarrassment came into your life. So you can see why I'm trying to get it to groups of 3 or 4, because there's probably only, you know, some of those stories you want to have a really small group with, right? That you feel comfortable with. So go ahead. Why don't you